British Columbia's Sunshine Coast. It's a world-famous collection of islands, inlets, and communities, tracing the eastern perimeter of Georgia Strait. Towering forests.
The Sunshine Coast is blessed with having some of the finest tree-growing land in Canada.
Unique marine species.
They look quite prehistoric, a couple 100 million years old.
And incredible subsea treasures.
In a world of shrinking resources, we're bringing this one back to life.
Now, we reveal the coastlines like never before, unlocking the secrets of our maritime past, present, and future. Canada, over the edge. North of the city of Vancouver lies the tiny community of Horseshoe Bay. It is home to roughly 1,000 people, marking the end of the mainland stretch of British Columbia's Highway 1. From here, travelers head to sea. Horseshoe Bay is one of 5 major ferry terminals in the province. More than 5 million vehicles and 7 million passengers pass through here each year. The largest ferries head to Nanaimo on Vancouver Island and Langdale to the northwest. The vessels are massive, measuring 139 meters, carrying nearly 1,500 passengers. Smaller vessels, like the Queen of Capilano, carry just a few hundred island hoppers to nearby Snug Cove. Offshore, the islands of Howe Sound lie in the distance. Bowen Island is one of 4 major islands here. It is situated near the mouth of the sound. From the summit of Mount Gardner, dense forests cover much of Bowen Island's 50 square kilometers. Further north, the waters of Howe Sound are a bustling waterway. Pleasure craft frequent these sheltered waters. Workboats transporting hundreds of logs are a unique sight here. Next, Gambier Island is the largest island in Howe Sound. It is 69 square kilometers of remote, rugged coast. The island is home to just over 100 people, with no paved roads and no businesses. Gambier Island also offers one unique attraction, tucked into the sheltered waters of Port Graves Bay. This is HMCS Annapolis, commissioned by the Royal Canadian Navy in 1964. It enjoyed a storied career, carrying the first tow-to-ray sonar system and the first mixed-gender crew in Canadian naval history. HMCS Annapolis was decommissioned in 1996. Today, the vessel sits, waiting to be sunk as an artificial reef, another attraction for divers on a coastline already famous for wrecks. British Columbia's mainland coast is a rich, unique landscape. One kilometer west of Gambier Island, the community of Langdale is identified by its ferry terminal and known as the gateway to what many consider British Columbia's best-kept secret. The Sunshine Coast. The Sunshine Coast measures 177 kilometers of winding shoreline, set between the coast mountains and the sea. It is a collection of bays, inlets, and interconnected lakes, stretching northwest from Howe Sound to Desolation Sound. It is part of the British Columbia mainland, but isolated from the rest of the world. Boats and float planes offer the only access here. All along the Sunshine Coast, spectacular nature is interspersed with iconic communities. This is the town of Gibsons. It is enshrined forever as the setting for the iconic Canadian television series, The Beachcombers. But Gibsons also holds a real-life reputation. the recipient of numerous acclaims, from best tasting water in the world to the world's most livable community. The region is popular for retirees and those seeking a more active lifestyle. Residents and visitors are attracted by water, kayaking, boating, and a more recent phenomenon, paddle surfing. The Sunshine Coast is also an industrial hotbed. Many communities are built around the natural resources sector.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen, all for free. No subscription required.
There are more than 1.5 million hectares of forest here. With 15 species of trees harvested commercially. Far below, the Howe Sound Pulp and Paper Company is part of that industry. Millions of tons of wood chips are brought here by barge each year. A byproduct of the logging and sawmill industry. The chips are steamed, then ground into pulp, using 19,000 horsepower grinders, twice the horsepower of a jet engine. Finally, they are made into paper, or newsprint, more than 1,000 meters per minute. Howe Sound's mill produces enough annual newsprint to circle the Earth 12 times. Inland, another unique feature of BC's natural resources industry lies below. Community forests were established in the 1990s, a new approach to balancing industry, community, and ecology.
We're in Sechelt, British Columbia. It's on the lower south coast in the southwest corner of BC. The Sunshine Coast is blessed with having some of the finest tree-growing land in Canada. It's a combination of soils, mild winters, long growing seasons. When you look back on the harvesting of timber in the coast of BC, from an industrial point of view, it began in the late 1800s, and back in the day it was done to the standards, but there weren't very many standards, and by today's standards it just simply wouldn't be acceptable what they did then. But over the decades, things have improved.
The Sunshine Coast Community Forest is a mix of old growth and second growth trees. Some are harvested commercially, while others are not.
This Douglas fir that I'm standing beside is quite a typical Douglas fir for a tree that's probably in the order of 70 to 80 years old. It'll probably be in the order of 150 feet tall. very typical of the type of trees in this stand that we're standing in, but also with the great growing sites that we have to grow trees here on the Sunshine Coast. This tree right behind me is an old-growth Douglas fir, magnificent specimen of a Douglas fir. It would be in the order of 500 plus years old, perhaps 800 years old. It's about 8 to 10 feet across in diameter, and we would leave the old growth standing. We wouldn't be harvesting trees like this one behind me. We would leave them standing in perpetuity. Community forest basically is any forest that is managed or owned by a community or to, with much more community direct input and more appreciation for community values. Here in BC, it was in the late 1990s that they really brought forward the community forest tenure system. In terms of what we're trying to accomplish, we are running a business. Community forest is a business, and I think starting this year, I think our economic return back to the district of Sechelt will improve and at the same time increase in dollar value.
There is also a community aspect to the community forest, with broad consideration given to public use for these lands.
Aside from the economic, we also do consider and take into consideration a wide variety of feedback from the community. It can be any one of a number of values, whether it's recreation, or whether it's promoting ecotourism, whether it's promoting any one of a number of things. But the three most important, we're trying to consider economic and social and ecological values and balance those three. There's literally hundreds of kilometers of trails on the coast here. This particular stand that we're standing in here now, Big Tree, is a set-aside recreation site by the Ministry of Forests. A very popular site, easy trail access. You can drive relatively close and then walk in on the trails to enjoy being in a forest as magnificent as this one. And I suspect there will be more of these kind of sites in the future. There's a very strong mandate within the community forest to try and develop more recreational values and provide more economic benefits from the community forest, not just from timber harvesting, but through other initiatives as well, be it ecotourism or other types of outdoor recreation that would bring tourism to the Sunshine Coast.
British Columbia's Sunshine Coast is a remote coastal gem. The region has been a home to First Nations for thousands of years. Today, it is a year-round residence for many. For others, a cherished summertime retreat. Just kilometers from the Sunshine Coast Community Forest, the community of Sechelt lies ahead. It is built on a narrow 1.2-kilometer isthmus, dividing Sechelt Inlet from Georgia Strait. The name Sechelt comes from the coastal Salish language, translated land between two waters. The region was later settled by Europeans in the 1860s. By the 1880s, it was established as a logging and fishing community. It is a legacy that continues today on Sechelt Inlet. Justin Henry is general manager for the world's first Fraser River white sturgeon caviar production facility.
Right now we're on the shores of Sechelt Inlet on the Sunshine Coast in British Columbia. Caviar is made from the eggs of sturgeon mixed with a small amount of salt. That creates caviar. We're growing the Fraser River white sturgeon. So far, the only ones in the world to do that.
Using fresh, cold water from the surrounding hills, Henry and his team grow mature sturgeon from eggs.
The start of the process is really with a mature fish, where we'll take a female and spawn that fish together with a couple of males. We'll do a cesarean and remove the eggs, and then we'll fertilize those eggs and incubate them in jars. This is the incubation building, and due to biosecurity restrictions, we won't all go in there, but I'll go in, I'll get some fish and bring them out so that we can take a look at how big they are and what they look like at this stage.
After just 6 days in the dark confines of the incubation building, the fertilized eggs hatch.
These are the white sturgeon. They're a few weeks of age. You can see that there are different sizes of fish in the jar. These are all coming from one tank. The fish grow quite rapidly at this stage, where they are doubling in size every week or so. We'll grow them till they're about 5 grams in that building and then move them out to larger tanks.
It is a complex but environmentally conscious operation, just meters from Sechelt Inlet.
These are the filters for an outdoor research system. So water's coming through here through a drum filter. We're taking out the solid waste, which goes to be mixed with wood chips to make compost. Then the water's pumped through this biological filter where we grow bacteria. They consume the ammonia, and then the water just gravity feeds back to the tanks. So we have about 99% recirculation on these tanks here. We could take a look at these fish. They're 1 year older than the ones that we just saw.
The sturgeon grow for 3 to 4 years. Once the sex of the sturgeon is determined, males are sold for food, while females continue to grow.
White sturgeon is native to the west coast of North America. It's the largest freshwater fish in North America. The white sturgeon gets up to 1,600 pounds in the wild, so it's an enormous fish. You can see the scutes on the outside of the fish. They're little bony plates on the outside. Internally, the sturgeon have no bone, but externally they have some bony plates. The fish are a couple 100 million years old, so they look quite prehistoric, and in fact they are. They were here since the beginning of the dinosaurs.
When the fish are fully grown, the caviar is extracted in a carefully monitored sterile operations room.
This is the caviar room. When the caviar is removed from the female, it comes through an opening in the wall into this room, and we process just one fish at a time. It's a very simple process, yet it takes a lot of expertise to do it just right. So this is the final product. After so many years of work, we finally have a great product at the end of it. We've had tremendous feedback on our caviar. It's been very positive. Some of the top chefs have tried it and just love the product. And it was rated as one of the top 5 sustainable caviars in the world. We've just started on the caviar scene. It takes such a long time to grow the fish. The fish that we're about to harvest this year are 12 years old. So it's been a long time building the business, and we've just really made it to the starting gate in terms of the caviar.
Heading offshore, the islands of Georgia Strait are a remote wonder. This is Texada Island. It is 50 kilometers long, the largest island in the strait. It is sparsely populated, with long stretches of barren coastline. Texada's history is rooted in natural resources. First with the discovery of gold in the 1800s, then copper and iron. It was later a fishing outpost, a center for whaling operations long ago. Today, Texada Island is considered to hold one of the most significant mineral reserves in Canada. More than 4,000 acres on the island are devoted to limestone quarries. It is the second largest operation of its kind in Canada. Up to 7.3 million tons of limestone are extracted annually. The limestone is blasted, crushed, and shipped around the world from Texada's deep water loading facility. Some say there is enough limestone here to continue operations for more than 200 years. Returning east, we explore the isolated inland waterways of the Sunshine Coast, revealing incredible subsea treasures. The Sunshine Coast is a formidable stretch of marine perimeter, featuring rolling hills, inlets, and jagged shorelines. 5 kilometers east of Texada Island, spectacular waterways lie below. This is Lois Lake. It is 14 kilometers long and 141 meters deep. While it is called a lake, it is actually a reservoir, formed with the construction of a hydroelectric dam decades ago. It flooded nearly 2,500 hectares. Today, water is forced through gates in the dam, spinning a massive turbine and producing 34.7 megawatts of energy. But the most unique aspect of Lois Lake is found underwater. Flooding here has left thousands of trees perfectly preserved. Now a new brand of forestry is being revealed, harvesting these submerged forests. It is a phenomenon that exists near hydroelectric dams all over the world.
Presently, there are 60,000 hydroelectric projects that have flooded some volume of forest worldwide. Almost always, these trees have been left. The next challenge to any harvesting operation for us or remediation project is to then look at the asset and figure out the right way to go about doing it. And like a lot of forestry, like a lot of land-based forestry, you begin with a lot of planning about how you approach cutting those trees down and bringing them to the surface and turning them into useful wood products.
The deep waters of Lois Lake became a testing ground for Peter Keyes and his team. They patented their own unmanned underwater harvesting system. They call it the Sawfish.
The Sawfish is where this technology began for our company. So it's an ROV, remote operated vehicle, that can go to virtually any depth. This is a tethered piece of equipment that starts on a barge, and a pilot actually flies the ROV, the Sawfish, down to the depth, finds the tree, inject airbags into it, cut the tree floats to the surface, and it's collected. While that ROV is on the bottom of the lake, it then moves over 2 meters, 5 meters, wherever, finds the next tree and cuts it. And that's, I think, the special trick is its ability to harvest a tree every 2-3 minutes. The tree is perfectly preserved. In a freshwater, low oxygen environment, without bugs to attack it, a tree, either a softwood or a hardwood tree, will last indefinitely.
In recent years, the team has explored reservoirs with much shallower waters, using an even newer subsea tree harvester. They call it the Shark.
The concept came from the engineering and operations group within the group, and they formed from that ground up this concept of developing technology that would be an efficient harvester of a shallow lake reservoir, and that was born the Shark. The Shark is an amazing piece of equipment for us. It's a combination of forestry and marine technology that we've harvested together in efforts to be an effective and efficient harvester of the resource, going down to a depth of about 25, 27 meters.
This new technology took them to Ghana and the tree-infested waters of Lake Volta.
Lake Volta is the largest man-made reservoir in the world, approximately 850,000 hectares. So with a really very strong relationship with the government, we began a process of securing a concession that is 350,000 hectares. We've been cutting trees since the middle of 2011, we put a sawmill in and converting the round logs into lumber products starting in September of 2011, and that's our business. We believe fundamentally that we're talking about a reclaimed resource, that until we bring it up is worth nothing. We think a reclaimed resource is an amazing story. We don't think there's anything better than a reclaimed resource. And we convert that to make into a variety of wood products, lumber products, and it's remarkably well received. There really is. There's an inexhaustible supply of resources around the world, of reservoirs around the world that have been treed, and almost never have those trees been cut down. So our business, and when we talk about sustainability, is that, you know, after we clear these trees out of a reservoir, it's gone. However, the sustainability issue is there's countless resources in front of us. There are 75 projects on the books today around the world that are either designing or building a hydroelectric project. You know, we believe we can contribute to the solution of those trees that almost always or never cut down before the flooding. I think that today's environment is crying out for products like that, because in a world of shrinking resources, we're bringing this one back to life.
West of Loess Lake, the city of Powell River is the last major community along the Sunshine Coast. It is a traditional home to the Coast Salish peoples and a stopping point for gold prospectors in the 19th century. Powell River was incorporated a century ago, built around its pulp and paper mill, once the largest of its kind in the world. The Sunshine Coast is home to 48,000 residents, spread along one of the world's most scenic shorelines. Just inland, far from civilization, the landscape begins a magnificent ascent. This is Khartoum Lake, featuring serene, pristine waters, a signature of this region. Measuring 300 hectares, the lake is surrounded by the rising summits of the Coast Mountain Range. Beyond, Hotham Sound is a sheltered waterway, lined by rolling hills, covered in dense forest. The waters here are the deepest on the west coast, descending 732 meters. To the northeast, beyond Mount Calder, Jervis Inlet lies below. It is one of several major inlets along British Columbia's western coastline. Jervis Inlet extends 77 kilometers inland, deep into the Coast Mountain Range. The waters are lined with steep granite cliffs and soaring mountain peaks. The deep waters are used by the Canadian and American militaries for submarine and sonar testing. The inlet is divided into 3 sections, or reaches, first surveyed by the HMS Plumper in 1860. The reaches were named in honor of Queen Victoria's family, Prince of Wales Reach, Princess Royal Reach, and Queen's Reach. It is a remote waterway with no road access from the outside world. Near the northeast extremity of Jervis Inlet, one final display of natural beauty in one of the province's most remote coastal locations. This is Princess Louisa Inlet. It is located 50 kilometers from the nearest road, a haven for recreational boaters, attracted by secure anchorage, calm waters, and unbelievable surroundings. Princess Louisa Inlet is 8 kilometers long, 300 meters deep, and 800 meters wide at its widest point. Thousands of years of glaciation has carved this gorge, leaving the inlet nearly surrounded on all sides by towering cliffs. On the shoreline, a shower of pristine water marks one of the natural gems of Princess Louisa Inlet. It is James Bruce Falls, considered to be the highest measured waterfall in North America and one of the top 10 in the world. It flows 840 meters down winding rock faces. Throughout much of the year, dozens of waterfalls cascade down these cliffs to Princess Louisa Inlet below. Their secret lies in the towering peaks beyond. Massive mountains of ice, like Mount Albert, and the glacier known locally as Sun Peak, line the edges of the inlet. They stand more than 2 kilometers high, holding an unimaginable supply of water. But they measure just a fraction of the glacial ice covering the British Columbia landscape. More than 25,000 square kilometers of spectacular ice fields and icy peaks. It is truly one of the most majestic landscapes on Earth. From the towns of Gibsons and Sechelt along British Columbia's Sunshine Coast, to its serene interconnected coastal lakes, and the awe-inspiring reaches of Jervis Inlet, Princess Louisa Inlet, and beyond. British Columbia's Sunshine Coast is one of the world's great remote wonders. It is a wealth of natural resources. A safe passage for recreational boaters. And a treasure trove of unimaginable riches. Here on the edge of Canada. The west coast of Vancouver Island, a palette of spectacular landscapes, from barren coastlines to world-famous hiking trails. A coastal adventure destination.
Tofino is a small community located on the west coast. It's Canada's surfing capital.
A legacy of natural disaster.
Some people just didn't realize what was going to happen.
And a decades-old emergency response team defending this region.
Firefighting's pretty exciting. There's no fooling around, it's the real thing.
Now, we reveal the coastlines like never before, unlocking the secrets of our maritime past, present, and future. Canada, over the edge. For more than 200 kilometers, the western perimeter of Vancouver Island lies nearly untouched. It is accessible only by boat or plane, a rarely seen gem of nature. This is Makina Marine Provincial Park. Named after the 18th century First Nations chief, Makina. The park measures more than 2,500 hectares of wilderness. Hikers and explorers are drawn here for Makina's scenery, including miles of rugged sea caves, etched in time over millions of years. Offshore, jagged rocks line the shoreline. It is one of the signature features of this coastal region. Rough headlands and subsea reefs, a scenic wonder in calm seas, but a nightmare for navigators caught in coastal winds and waves. Continuing southeast, Flores Island measures 150 square kilometers of tranquil beauty. It is traditional territory of the Nootka First Nation. Spanish explorers arrived in the 18th century, and the island was named in honor of Manuel Antonio Flores, the 51st Viceroy of New Spain. The island is also home to Flores Island Provincial Park, featuring an array of wildlife and 3 protected watersheds within an awesome network of ancient Sitka spruce forests. It is the heart of a region known as Clayoquot Sound. Decades ago, this was the scene of worldwide anti-logging protests. Today, it is a protected United Nations Biosphere Reserve.
A biosphere reserve is a designation by UNESCO. And there's a set of criteria to list a biosphere reserve and to have that protective status. There has to definitely a perspective of preservation. And basically it's that there's a viable First Nations community within that biosphere reserve that lives and lives right on their territory.
The designation recognized the need to preserve over 100,000 hectares of coastal rainforest. It also recognized the unique cultural legacy of this region.
The First Nations within this designation is Ahousaht First Nation, Heshquet First Nation, Clayoquot First Nation, Chuquot First Nation, and Ucluetlot First Nation. and it's a beautiful territory to be associated with.
The UNESCO designation effort was supported by local communities, First Nations, and government. It marked the end of a lengthy conflict, seen by many as victory for both the coastal environment and First Nations residents.
20 years ago, I would say that the communities were fairly divided. There was what was termed the War in the Woods at the time. There was a real upswelling of protest that reached a very global perspective. And the protest was very much centered around watersheds that were being logged of their old growth timber.
It was protected, it was not to be logged, and the First Nations had their right and their say in preservation, and it was international recognition of First Nations' sovereign right to their lands and their territories and what happens within it. It was a great thing to see.
There was definitely a shift in the whole industrial perspective, and I would say that the communities in Clayoquot Sound led the way into that. Although the focal point was the trees, and there are a number of different species and old-growth trees that are majestic and huge and absolutely wonderful, there's a whole host of life that lives not just within these trees, but that is interconnected to all of the trees and the underground and the oceans and the rivers and the salmon. It's all connected.
Today, Clayoquot Sound continues to be a home to some of the world's most remarkable coastal rainforest and a home for First Nations peoples.
The way we were raised, everything has life. A stone, a blade of grass, everything requires respect and honor.
Just offshore the natural wonder known as Clayoquot Sound, Leonard Island lies below. On the southwest corner of the island, Leonard Island Light Station, built in 1904, rises above the rocky shoreline. It is a welcome sight to mariners along a notorious stretch of coast, known as the Graveyard of the Pacific. Kilometers away, on shore, Tofino is the first major community along this marine perimeter. It is an eerie coastal wonder, shrouded in fog and mist throughout much of the year. The town acquired its modern-day name in 1909 after cartographer Admiral Vincent Tofino, another legacy of Spanish coastal exploration centuries ago. The settlement drew farmers and was the base of operations for a small fishery. But the town was cut off from the outside world, accessible only by boat. A road connecting Tofino to the rest of Vancouver Island was not constructed until 1959. Today, Tofino marks the end of the island's Highway 4, more than 150 kilometers of roadway, beginning on Vancouver Island's eastern coastline. The region is adorned with some of the most spectacular buildings, resorts, and homes Vancouver Island has to offer. The shoreline surrounding Tofino is home to roughly 1,500 people. It is a mix of longtime residents and those seeking solitude and scenery. Roughly 1 million people visit Tofino each year, drawn by scenic wonders like Clayoquot Sound and Makina Marine Provincial Park. It is a destination for recreation seekers from around the world. It is a haven for surfers, considered by many to be Canada's top surf destination.
We're in Tofino, BC, Canada, and today we're surfing on Cox Bay. Tofino is a small community located on the west coast. We have a population of about 1,500 people. Although in the summertime it swells to probably around 5,000 with all the seasonal workers. And it's Canada's surfing capital. There's a ton of surf here, and the sport has gotten more and more popular over the years. We still have lots of other types of tourism here, but surfing is probably our #1 industry now. Still remember the first time I came to Tofino to learn to surf. From the second I stepped into the water, I fell in love. I was only supposed to come up to Tofino for 1 summer to learn to surf, and 14 years later, I'm here and I'm here to stay. I love this place. The surfing here in Tofino can be quite rugged, so it develops a different type of surfing breed out there. It's one of those sports where if you're down in California, you can hang out on the beach and suntan and, just pretend, kind of play the part. But here, the surfers are real. It's not that much fun to put on a big, wetsuit every day to head out there. So you get a real dedicated crop of surfers. A lot more rugged probably than some of the other surfers, in warmer places.
Another unique feature of Tofino's surf scene is its demographic. Tofino is a haven for female surfers, an idea promoted by Chrissy Montgomery and her Surf Sisters team.
It's just made like a resource outlet for women who kind of want to be interested in the sport, but were maybe a bit intimidated in the first place. Out here, it's common to have half the water be females and half the water males, whereas any other place you go in the world for surfing, you won't find that. Maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 20, 1 in 50 surfers is a female, whereas out here, it's almost half and half these days. In a class, it's so beautiful to watch like a girl come out who's maybe shy at first, and by the end of the lesson, she's proud she can do this thing that's not an easy sport by any means, but it's definitely got a really rewarding feel to it. I definitely think in the future, surfing will only get more popular here. I'm pretty excited about the new group of athletes that's growing up here in this community. A lot of us surfers out here are sort of first-generation surfers. Our parents didn't surf or anything, so the sport, was something that we learned sort of later on in life. Whereas there's a lot of young families, a lot of young kids starting out here. I'm really excited to see just the local talent grow, as well as just the integrity of, surfing in Canada in general.
Heading inland, the majestic landscape of Vancouver Island rises up for all to see. This is Strathcona Provincial Park, British Columbia's oldest, established in 1911. It covers more than 2,500 square kilometers, an incredible collection of mountains, glaciers, and lakes. The landscape is a mix of ancient Paleozoic rock and layers of volcanic basalt, kilometers thick. The mountains here belong to the Vancouver Island Range, covering 30,000 square kilometers, part of the larger insular mountain chain. The chain was formed by the movement of tectonic plates over millions of years. Today, those plates continue to collide, meaning these mountains will continue to rise. Next, a return to the rugged coast, and we trace a legacy of natural disaster along Vancouver Island's amazing inland waterways. From Strathcona Provincial Park, we return to the coast, Vancouver Island's western Pacific coastline. This is the town of Ucluelet, set 40 kilometers southwest of Tofino. Ucluelet is translated "people of the safe harbor" from the indigenous Nootka language. The town is home to just over 1,500 people and has had a First Nations presence for more than 4,000 years. European settlers arrived in the 1870s, seeking seal fur and later gold. In the early 20th century, a lighthouse was built, marking the development of the coastal fishing and whaling industries. Beyond Ucluelet, The Alberni Inlet is Vancouver Island's main inland waterway. It is a long, narrow passage, twisting and turning with the contours of the inlet. The waterway is home to some of the world's top salmon and halibut fishing. Further inland, the banks of the inlet rise, on approach to the changing landscape of the Alberni Valley. This is the midway point of Vancouver Island, a unique stretch surrounded by mountains, rainforests, lakes, and streams. Finally, 48 kilometers from the open waters of the Pacific, this is the town of Port Alberni. It is home to 25,000 people and is named after Captain Alberni, another Spanish explorer. The town was established in the 19th century as fur traders sought a land route across Vancouver Island. Port Alberni quickly became the hub of the forestry sector, with its proximity to abundant natural resources. BC's first sawmill opened here in 1861. In the coming decades, others would begin operations, and BC lumber quickly became a top export. But many say Port Alberni's most famous moment came on the heels of one of the West Coast's great disasters of the 20th century.
On Easter weekend in 1964, there was a tragic earthquake in Alaska. The high-speed tsunami wave proceeded down the west coast of Alaska and then past the Queen Charlottes. And as it came down the west coast, it was just the right shape and proceeding in just the right direction that it kind of hooked on the end of Barkley Sound. Because of the shape of the Barkley Sound, the water was trapped, and then as it moved in up the fjord, the trapped water, instead of being only inches high out in the Barkley Sound area, which it was, it became narrower and narrower, but higher and higher. By the time it proceeded into the harbor area, it was coming in just like a big high tide. The water just kept coming up and up and up, and it came up to a height some 18 or 20 feet higher than the highest high tide that we would have ever seen. I recall just the huge amount of debris floating, and the movement of the water going in great circles like a big bathtub swirl. The damage that was caused by the inundation of the water was a huge economic hit to the valley. The forest industry, the mills, most of the pulp mills and the sawmills are in lower areas, and they were all flooded with salt water. Any electronics, of course, were destroyed.
Don Bryant was one of Port Alberni's disaster first responders.
I was one of the squad leaders and a part-time coordinator for the rescue squad at the time. I received a phone call from the RCMP about 11:30 on the Friday night to get the squad out. There had been a flood on River Road. By that time, the RCMP and the police department had been around with a loudhailer telling everybody to evacuate. We had at that time, I believe, 25 members of the rescue squad. We got them organized, so we tried to get them going door to door so every door was knocked on before the big wave hit. And like I say, there was just some people just didn't realize what was going to happen. And we didn't either till after it was over. It was definitely a miracle that nobody was killed.
I guess one of the outcomes of the tsunami in '64 was that it put Port Alberni on the map as oh, that's the place where the tsunami happened.
It's something that will never be forgotten by the people that were here, that's for sure. I was born here and I never saw anything like it before, and I'm sure, I hope I don't want to see it again either.
Since the tsunami, Port Alberni has become a leader in coastal disaster prevention. Throughout the town, loudspeakers stand ready to warn residents of impending high waters. It is a bold attempt to avoid future disaster on one of Western Canada's most serene and peaceful inland waterways. From Port Alberni, we head south along the Alberni Inlet towards the open waters of the Pacific. Just outside town, Sprout Lake lines the inlet and holds another example of Port Alberni's legacy of disaster relief. These are the largest flying boats ever flown operationally. They are the Martin Mars fleet, featuring the soon-to-be retired Philippine Mars and the Hawaii Mars. They are formidable forest fire water bombers, a beloved symbol of the Alberni region. Pete Killen is a pilot with the Martin Mars fleet.
Okay, I'll give you a quick tour of the aircraft. Up front here in the bow is our anchor compartment. Have a Danforth anchor in the winch system. It's deployed out this door through a davit. Anchors drop down, and we can day base in various areas when we go out and have to hold for a little while, we'll put the anchor out and wait for our assignments. So in here we've got 3 gel and foam tanks, 180 US gallons a tank. They converted 2 center fuel tanks into a water tank, and that's what you see here. And I can give you an idea of what you got in here. This is 6,000 gallons of capacity. Water's introduced into the aircraft by 2 probes situated just behind the step of the aircraft. There's a toggle switch on the console that we just select probes down. Water's rammed in at about 70 knots. Takes 30 seconds to put on 6,000 gallons of water.
The bombers are designed to carry a payload of more than 27,000 kilograms. They have been described as a huge wet blanket.
So in this area here, the upper cargo area, when this airplane was in Navy service, not only was it a cargo plane, but it was also a great big ambulance. I think the last flight that these aircraft did with the Navy was 1956. They were put up for sale and they were actually bought for $100,000. But they got the 4 airplanes ferried up to Victoria and they were converted into a firefighting role. So this is the flight engineer station. There's 2 engineers at any given time. The lead engineer, she's taking care of the start. Second engineer would be downstairs in the bow of the airplane. And after the start order has been called, he'll release the airplane from the buoy, and then we go off. After we've taxied out, there's 20 minutes of warm-up before we can go through the systems checks on the airplane.
4 bombers were originally converted into flying firefighting machines. The first crashed in a tragic operation. Another was destroyed during a typhoon. The remaining 2, the Philippine Mars and the Hawaii Mars, have flown for more than 45 years.
So we got 4 Wright Cyclone engines, 2,500 horsepower each, so we have 10,000 horsepower. Oil capacity on these engines are 100 gallons of oil per engine. We consume about between 2 and 3 gallons an hour. All right. Could I have a pre-start check, please?
Pre-start check, dump door switches.
Selected, closed.
Probe switch.
Selected up.
Gel switch.
Selected off.
Control mounts.
Are in place.
Power forward, circuit breakers, video, circuit breakers, pallets, pedestal.
Are all in.
And video circuit breakers, the breakers are set. Ignition switches.
4 on, off at the post.
And throttles.
Free and full travel.
Since the tragic loss of the prototype bomber in 1961, the Philippine and Hawaii Mars have flown accident-free, a testament to the dedication and skills of Killen and his team. Prior to being converted to water bombers in 1961, the Martin Mars fleet flew 87,000 hours for the U.S. Navy, setting airlift and endurance records that are yet to be broken.
we can go out for a long time. Typically, we'll go for about a 5-hour sortie, and then we've started running low on our gels and stuff like that, and fuel.
Along with water, the bombers carry more than 2,000 liters of foam concentrate and specialized firefighting thermogels. The bombers can drop any of these payloads, depending on the nature of the fire.
Firefighting's pretty exciting. We get down and we get serious about our jobs, and there's no fooling around. It's the real thing. There's days that we're working in some pretty marginal conditions, mostly smoke. We have turbulence, confined areas. You know, fires are never textbook. They're in hard to reach places and very steep terrain. We have high altitude, just working the airplane to its maximum capabilities.
Working together, the bombers can release more than 27,000 liters every 7 minutes, covering 1.6 hectares. Now, the Philippine Mars is set to be retired to the National Naval Aviation Museum in Florida, making the Hawaii Mars the last remaining water bomber of its kind in the world. The retirement is a bittersweet moment for residents in the Sprout Lake region and for Pete Killen.
Well, most people in Port Alberni consider these their airplanes. They've been so iconic in their life on this lake. On that beach over there, I was 8 years old on vacation with my dad and my sisters, and looked over from that beach over to this spot here, and there was the one of the Mars were here painted blue. Talked to my dad about it, and he said that they were here to become firefighters. And that would have been 1961. I kind of wish my dad had lived long enough to see me become one of the pilots of it.
Returning to the coast, the open waters of Barkley Sound lie below. It's an 800 square kilometer body of water connecting Alberni Inlet with the Pacific Ocean. It is home to hundreds of tiny islands and is the marine boundary separating the town of Ucluelet to the west and Cape Beale Lighthouse to the east. Cape Beals Light Station is the oldest on Vancouver Island's western coastline. The original station was completed in 1874. Its light visible 30 kilometers out to sea. The station was rebuilt in 1958 and today stands 10 meters tall, 51 meters above sea level. The shorelines of Vancouver Island's west coast are a rugged gem along the vast waters of the Pacific. This coastline is also the site of one of Canada's most impressive national parks. Pacific Rim National Park Reserve is a hidden treasure, encompassing beaches, islands, and remote hiking trails. The rugged coastlines are lined by incredible temperate rainforests, a gem of Canada's west coast.
Right now, we're in Pacific Rim National Park Reserve. We're located on the outer west coast of Vancouver Island, and the park is situated in a narrow strip basically between the Vancouver Island range of the insular mountains and the Pacific Ocean.
Pacific Rim National Park Reserve covers more than 500 kilometers of coastline. The unique climate produces an abundance of natural life.
We have a broad diversity of both flora and fauna, consisting of Sitka spruce, cedar hemlock. We have 3 large carnivores that inhabit this area, namely cougar, wolf, and black bear.
The park is divided into 3 distinct and separate sections: the Broken Group Islands, the world-famous West Coast Trail, and the Long Beach Unit, popular for recreation.
The Long Beach unit of the park is very popular for surfers. So we have beautiful expanses of beaches here with soft sand, a little bit of forest for hiking, as well as beautiful surf for surfing. We've got a lot of people that come from all over the world to recreate and be here as a tourist destination because it's so beautiful. But we also have a lot of wildlife here, so that makes it really unique. The Broken Group Islands are situated in Barkley Sound, and that's just south of the Long Beach unit, and it's comprised of about 100 smaller islets, most of which are very sheltered. As such, the water is very calm. So it's very popular for kayakers and recreational boaters. most southernmost unit is the West Coast Trail, and that is primarily a world-renowned hiking trail and old-growth forest. The West Coast Trail originated as a telegraph line, and in 1906, after the wreck of the Valencia, they made it into a life-saving trail to help with possible evacuations from Cape Bill to Victoria. And after that, it kind of became a world-renowned hiking trail, and that's what it exists today. It's about 75 kilometers long of very rugged terrain that passes through beaches and large tracts of old-growth forest. There are amazing wildlife to be seen along the West Coast Trail, and it takes about 5 or 6 days to hike in total, and you're exposed right open to the Pacific Ocean, so it's quite an experience. For local people that live here, this park is amazing. It's in their backyard, both terrestrial environment as well as the marine environment. It's basically one giant playground to go and recreate and live. This is a really magical place for our local people.
From the ecological wonders of Clayoquot Sound along Vancouver Island's rugged western perimeter, to scenic Alberni Inlet and the industrial heart of the province in Port Alberni, Vancouver Island's western region is an incredible showcase. With a human timeline stretching back more than 4,000 years, the legacies of this coastline carry on. Enshrined forever in the unforgettable coastlines and awe-inspiring inlets, here on the edge of Canada. The Yukon's Dempster Highway region. From the Arctic Circle, exploring one of the world's great road trips, to the gold rush settlement of Dawson City and the soaring hills surrounding, tracing the legacy of Yukon gold.
Out of the 100,000 that started out for the Klondike, 40,000 arrived in a mass flotilla.
Exploring the Yukon landscape from a bird's eye view.
The best way to see the Yukon is from the air, from a paraglider. Wouldn't you really want to be doing this?
And a safe haven to many, just south of the Arctic Circle.
The winters here on the extreme side, 45 below, winds 115-20 kilometers.
Now, we reveal the secrets of Canada's northern boundary, more than 160,000 kilometers of Arctic frontier. Canada, over the edge. Just north of the 66th parallel, the Arctic Circle marks a rough halfway point between the Yukon's Dawson City and the Northwest Territories town of Inuvik, along the 737-kilometer Dempster Highway. But while this sign may claim to pinpoint the Arctic Circle's exact location, it's not entirely accurate. The Arctic Circle is not a fixed location, drifting north 15 meters each year, caused by the fluctuating tilt of the Earth and the orbital pull of the Moon. Nonetheless, nearly every northern traveler stops here to experience this unique geographic landmark. Heading south, we follow the contours of the Dempster Highway. From its northern terminus in Inuvik, the highway passes boreal forest, the Mackenzie and Peel Rivers, and the Richardson Mountains. Further south, the Dempster crosses more rivers, vast plains, and some of the Earth's most stunning mountain ranges. And here, 368 kilometers south of Inuvik, we start our journey at the Dempster Highway's one safe haven, the only rest stop along this more than 700-kilometer roadway. It is the Eagle Plains Hotel and Service Station, operated by owner and local lifesaver, Stan McNevin.
Eagle Plains is located about midway up the Dempster Highway, and we're approximately 80 miles east of the Yukon-Alaska border and 60 miles south of the Yukon-Northwest Territories border. The next closest direct fill-up to the south would be approximately 5.5 hours and about 550, 600 kilometers.
Along with hotel facilities and a restaurant, Eagle Plains is a base of operations for emergency response and a self-contained sanctuary for the harsh Yukon winter.
The winters here on the extreme side could be 45 below, winds approximately anywhere to 80 to 115, 20 kilometers. Average winter day, of course, is about minus 25, minus 30. This area over here is where maintenance and highways have storage for their equipment. They can do the repairs in that region. And then there's also where we store our ambulance for any roadside emergencies.
McNevin's operation at Eagle Plains may be the only Dempster attraction more popular than the Arctic Circle. Today, he's so popular, he can't even finish his interview, summoned by a group of stranded German tourists.
After the major mechanical breakdown.
McNevin quickly determines it is a problem with the air compressors in their unique tour bus.
And you don't have another one? This is just an air fitting. You know this is the leak though, eh? You've seen the air coming out of here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. We should take it off here and not there. Okay. So we'll take that off? There. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Years of knowledge and a warehouse full of supplies will hopefully get this group back on the Dempster.
Good, I'll have to see if I can find something with that thread.
Okay.
The fix is a success. Now, they refuel for the long ride ahead.
Yeah, the road is bad.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have the parts.
Sure. We have no cell phone, no service, no anything.
I live that life every day.
Today's operation is a near everyday occurrence along the Dempster Highway. And it's because of moments like this that Stan McNevin calls Eagle Plains home.
The northern Yukon's beautiful. It's a lot of work, but we definitely enjoy the location. There's no lineups here, and we get to meet people from all over the world. Your job can be quite fulfilling. Because you're dealing with people from all over the world and the issues change hourly, you really do feel that you're supplying an essential service.
From the Eagle Plains Hotel and Service Station, we head south, soaring above the region known as Eagle Plains, a 200-kilometer wide corridor lined by gentle rolling hills. The Dempster Highway is unique, a 2-lane gravel roadway designed to withstand harsh conditions in Canada's north. It is built on an elevated gravel pad, some 2 meters above ground. The gravel serves as insulation, keeping the permafrost in the ground from melting and the road from sinking. Further south, the landscape changes dramatically. Here, vibrant forests of tamarack and black spruce suddenly disappear, burnt to the ground. While Yukon winters can be fierce, the summers can be equally extreme. Lightning storms can spark forest fires that last for months, including a July 1991 blaze that burned until the snow fell, destroying 5,500 hectares of stunning wilderness. Finally, beyond burnt hectares of forest, we reach another landmark in the southern Dempster region. This is the Ogilvie viewpoint, located at the end of Eagle Plain. Like the Arctic Circle, 140 kilometers to the north, the viewpoint is a popular stop for Dempster commuters. From here, visitors can see 180 kilometers, a panoramic view of the Ogilvie and Peel Rivers, the southern Richardson Mountains, and in the distance, the Ogilvie Mountains. Jagged granite peaks rising more than 2 kilometers high. The Ogilvie Peel Viewpoint is an incredible Dempster Highway landmark. And while it marks the end of Eagle Plain, it also marks the beginning of another unique geographical feature. This is 7 Mile Hill, an incredible descent of 300 meters. Spread over 7 miles. From this sandstone plateau to the Ogilvie River below. And in the course of the descent, we cross the Continental Divide, determining the direction of rivers, north to the Beaufort Sea, or west to the Bering Sea. Finally, at the base of 7 Mile Hill, we reach the crystal clear waters of the Ogilvie River. The Ogilvie River originates deep in the Ogilvie Mountains, flowing north, then east, and finally emptying into the Peel River, some 230 kilometers away. It is named in honor of William Ogilvie, a land surveyor charged with determining the northern Canada-US boundary in the 1880s. But Aboriginal peoples have traveled on this waterway even longer, known in the Gwich'in language as Gwalshal Imjik. Years later, the Ogilvie River remains a popular fishing spot, a habitat for Arctic grayling and northern pike. Next, around one final bend, the Ogilvie meets a smaller waterway known as Engineer Creek. Engineer Creek and the Engineer Creek Campground on nearby Sapper Hill are named in honor of the 3rd Royal Canadian Engineers, who built the bridge over the Ogilvie, with Sapper a nickname for an Army engineer. And in the rocks surrounding the bridge, a wealth of geological wonders can be found. limestone fossil coral dating back 400 million years to vast dolomite cliffs and red shale cliff faces colored by iron oxide present in these hills. Continuing into the mountains, we explore the vast reaches of the Taiga Range. The Taiga Range mountains are stunning, a stark contrast to the flat landscape of the Ogilvie River and Eagle Plain to the north. They are also home to an array of wildlife, including bald and golden eagles. Yukon eagles like this one are found mostly at lower elevations and will soon head for the Pacific coast to avoid the harsh Yukon winter. And the peaks of the Taiga Ranges also feature unique vegetation, with the mountain's north faces nearly barren and the sunny south faces lush with summer plant life. Continuing south, parallel to the contours of the Dempster Highway, we reach the swift-moving waters of the Blackstone River. The Blackstone River flows to the north, emptying into the Peel River, the Mackenzie River, and finally the Beaufort Sea. The Blackstone River is a popular spot for paddlers and hikers, with its course winding through the limestone peaks and ridges of the Ogilvie Mountains. And like other rivers in the region, the Blackstone River has been a home to Aboriginal peoples for generations. The river's name comes from the Gwich'in language, translated Boulder Black River. Further south, we reach the highest point on the scenic Dempster Highway. North Fork Pass rises 1,400 meters above sea level, a stretch of barren tundra, completely encased in permafrost. Underneath a thin active layer on the surface, the ground here has been frozen for thousands of years, making plant life sparse. And North Fork Pass leads to even greater wonders and the heart of the mountainous region known as Tombstone Territorial Park. Tombstone Territorial Park marks one of the most ethereal landscapes in North America and the world. Here, rolling hills and valleys stretch for kilometers. And even higher, soaring peaks fill the horizon. Tombstone Territorial Park lines the Dempster Highway, protecting 2,100 square kilometers of Yukon wilderness. The jagged landscape here is dominated by a tough igneous rock known as syenite. It grew from the ground some 90 million years ago, rising high into the sky. But over time, as the igneous rock cooled, cracks developed. Later, as glaciers moved through the region, they tore massive chunks of rock in their path, leaving behind the landscape we see today. Some of Tombstone Territorial Park's most prominent mountains can be seen from the Dempster Highway. Including Mount Monolith, Cathedral Mountain, and Tombstone Mountain, rising more than 2 kilometers high. Just south of the Tombstone mountain range, we return to the path of the Dempster Highway. On approach to kilometer zero and the southern terminus of this world-famous roadway. But lining the highway, mountains continue to dot the landscape. In the distance, the North Klondike mountain range features a series of soaring peaks, contrasted by rolling hills adorned in autumn Yukon splendor. Finally, 737 kilometers from the beginning of the Dempster Highway in Inuvik and 400 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle, we reach a crossroad. This is the Dempster Highway's southern end of the road. Canada's northernmost highway, constructed over 2 decades, connecting north and south. Beyond the Dempster, we head west, following the Klondike River, on approach to the town of Dawson City. The Klondike River is an impressive waterway, 160 kilometers in length. Like many waterways in the region, its source is located deep in the Ogilvie Mountains, flowing southwest to Dawson City and the Yukon River beyond. And like many of those same waterways, the Klondike is surrounded by incredible landscape. It is a view many choose to see by vehicle from the world-famous Dempster Highway. For others, it is a landscape that can only be truly experienced from above.
My name's Steve Kurth, and I'm a paraglider pilot in Dawson City, Yukon. The beauty is rolling hillsides, lots of valleys, rivers meandering through them, and mountains in the distance.
But for Kurth and friends, experiencing those wonders means venturing to one of the highest points surrounding Dawson.
The best way to see the Yukon, I guess I'd have to say, is from the air. And the best way from the air would be from a paraglider, because it's quiet, you're exposed to the elements, there's nothing to sort of separate you from your environment.
For paragliders, Kurth says Dawson is as unique as it gets, thanks to its endless summer days.
We decided to come up with a club called the Midnight Sun Flying Club. And that's open to anyone who will come to Dawson and fly at or after midnight. I'm not sure exactly where the membership stands right now. It's probably fairly small. If there's paraglider pilots out there watching it, come to Dawson City, join the Midnight Sun Flying Club. You could launch a paraglider one day and land it technically the next day, which is something that can't be done at southern latitudes. My claim to fame would be that you could pretty much point to any hour on the clock, and I've flown that hour in the air over Dawson legally. We're going to start getting geared up to maybe go for a flight. This is my fellow pilot, Trevor Mead Robbins from FlyYukon.com. He's going to go and fly with me too. So I think we're just going to get the gear out. There you go, complete aircraft, all in a bag. How cool is that? This is the harness. This is what you see it in. Out there's a reserve parachute in case things go wrong. They won't, but just in case.
Kurth begins by spreading out the paraglider and untangling his lines.
The sun heats the ground heats the air, and then hot air, as everyone pretty much knows, rises. You get all these columns of rising air through the atmosphere, and that's what paraglider pilots fly into. We look for those, and we fly into them, and then we rise up with the column air. The same if you watch the hawks and the ravens, and they all do the same thing. In fact, you look on a nice, beautiful, sunny day, and you see all the nice, white, puffy clouds in the sky. Each one of those nice, white, puffy clouds sits on top of a thermal column that has brought the air from the ground up to that altitude. And at that altitude, all the humidity in the air condenses, and that's what actually forms the cloud. If you see a nice white puffy cloud over Dawson, if you look closely, you might just see a paraglider right underneath it. So this is the front. This is called a leading edge. And the air comes in through these openings. As you're moving through the air comes in through here, and it's got nowhere to go. So it basically then just puffs up the whole wing, and that's what gives it the camber for your typical wing.
Finally, Kurth puts on a protective outer layer, and he's ready to fly.
What I'm doing right now is called kiting. Basically just standing here, flying a kite. It's kind of what it is. I can take off pretty much anytime I want right now. Wouldn't you really want to be doing this? All right, let's go flying. See ya. Paragliders are basically a sort of soft-structured nylon wing, and it creates sort of an airfoil shape basically by its own motion through the air. Air enters in the front, and then it sort of pressurizes the inside and puffs it up, and then gives it the shape of an airfoil. And once it has that shape of an airfoil, it's like any other airfoil, whether you're a Sparrow or a Boeing 747. It's the same laws of physics apply. You can ride for minutes on end, you could ride for hours on end. I've had days where, you can be in the air as long as you want. It's flying. It's the closest that you'll get to defying gravity. Ever since, humans developed the ability to dream and they saw a bird, everyone has dreamed about it. And I get to do it, on a very regular basis.
After endless minutes soaring above the Klondike River and Dawson City, Kurth and team touch down, ready to do it all again.
I think part of the enjoyment is just the harnessing of Mother Nature. Just me and a nylon bag and some know-how, and we're at 10,000 feet, and you kind of wonder, how did I get here?
Back on the ground, this is the town of Dawson City, known around the world for the Klondike Gold Rush of 1897. Today, Dawson is a unique community located at the confluence of the Klondike and Yukon rivers. Its downtown is a journey through time, with storefronts and homes offering a window into an era when thousands stampeded north to find treasure along these shores. And while it is the Gold Rush era that has been preserved in Dawson, humans have made this region home for thousands of years.
My name is Janice Cliff, and I am the Programs Coordinator at Parks Canada, and we are in the Dawson Historic Complex, a National Historic Site, right in the downtown core of Dawson City. Prior to the gold rush, we had the Trondek-Huetchen living here, the Han people. This is their traditional territory, and they were a migratory people following food sources. This was their traditional salmon fishing area. They comprise 1/3 of our population today in Dawson.
But the legacy of Dawson City, known to the outside world, dates back over a century to August 1896, with the discovery of gold on nearby Rabbit Creek. Within a month of the discovery, hundreds had joined the search. Soon, the story would break to the world.
It was a discovery of gold that had not been seen in the region. And that meant in the springtime of 1897, as soon as stern whalers could navigate the Yukon River, 80 miners were able to take their riches and board steamers, ocean-bound steamers, to head to Seattle and San Francisco. This essentially brought news of this strike to the outside world by July of 1897. But for a full year, it was relatively undiscovered.
And with that, life in Dawson changed forever.
People were scrambling to get a ticket on a steamer. And so that meant any craft that was somewhat seaworthy was put into the water. And we estimate that about 100,000 people tried to get to the Klondike. They came on the rails all across North America. They came from overseas. The news spread so quickly, and it was a thing. Are you on the rush? Are you going to the Klondike?
Thousands of prospectors made it to Dawson before the end of 1897. But the Dawson they'd heard rumors of in the South didn't exist. Paris of the North was in fact a swampy wasteland, good only for docking sternwheelers. with few true accommodations. Dawson was a tent city, and it was about to get worse.
So out of the 100,000 that we think started out for the Klondike, we estimate that about 40,000 arrived, and many of them in a mass flotilla in the spring of 1898. Dawson today has 8 avenues. In 1898, they went up 22 avenues, so into the hillside. The boreal forest was completely decimated for heating your log cabin, building your log cabin, thawing the ground to dig down in your shaft, so it was chaos.
Today in Dawson, relics remain from that era.
Right behind me is the old post office, built in 1900, and you can still go in it today. So this is one of my favorite buildings to bring people into. As soon as they get in here, they take a deep breath and you can smell the age of the building, if that makes any sense. A thing that people immediately are drawn to is the craftsmanship in the woodworking.
Janice Cliff says the post office was built in a lavish style, designed to fill potential investors with confidence as the gold rush began its decline.
So we're behind the scenes in the old post office. Part of what helps us tell the story of the gold rush is the over 250,000 articles that were left behind from the gold rush. So when you're looking at an inkwell or letters, left behind, I really think it helps put everything into perspective. It helps the visitor imagine what life would have been like here during the gold rush. The post office was extraordinarily important because this is your only communication with the outside world.
And down the street, the heart of Dawson's entertainment scene still stands, built in 1899.
So the streets of Dawson today are the same streets you would have seen during the gold rush. I'm on stage at the Palace Grand Theatre, gazing out into a sea of empty chairs, but in 1899 it would have been chock full of miners coming in from the creeks. Cheap seats in the front, 50 cents would get you in the door, a glass of whiskey at the bar and a cigar. But if you were one of the kings of the Klondike and you wanted to show off your newfound wealth, you'd want one of the box seats so you could gaze down at the unwashed masses below and show off your newly acquired wealth.
And with gold being discovered throughout the region, one of the most important buildings was the bank.
Finally, we're in the British Bank of North America, the last stop today. This was one of 2 banks that was here during the gold rush, and for the miners, what it meant is a fair exchange rate for your gold dust, because before the banks arrived, you paid for everything with gold dust. You'd have a set of scales, some crooked, some not. The merchants would give you $16 an ounce when the going rate was actually $20 an ounce. So it was quite a relief to have 2 banks arrive here at the height of the rush, so miners could exchange their gold dust for a banknote. A lot of money was changed here.
Janice Cliff gives tours to hundreds of Dawson visitors each summer. And while the stories and locations are the same, Dawson's legacy never diminishes in her mind.
I think something extraordinary happened here that people have a recent personal connection to. It was considered the greatest gold rush that ever occurred. There's a fascination with northern lore, the isolation of the region. And today it draws a really curious mix of people that are either here for the history, the arts, the small town sense of community. I think it's a combination of all of those factors that keeps people coming to Dawson City.
From the Arctic Circle and the outpost of Eagle Plains, to the winding waters of the Ogilvie River and Blackstone River, to the incredible peaks of Tombstone Territorial Park. The Yukon's Dempster Highway is truly one of the world's great road trips. From its soaring skyline, vast plateaus, and stunning Arctic colors, the Dempster Highway is a 40-year-old worldwide attraction. Surrounded by Gwich'in culture stretching back generations. And landscapes dating back even further. A world of wonder. Here on the edge of Canada. The Yukon Territory's western frontier. From the city of Whitehorse, following the scenic contours of the Alaska Highway, to the ethereal wonders of Kluane National Park. Recalling the legacy of the southern Shoshone peoples.
This whole country was a network of trails.
A national park at the western edge of Canada.
13 of the top 20 highest peaks in North America.
And touring glaciers from a bird's eye view.
Absolutely massive scale out there.
Now, we reveal the secrets of Canada's northern boundary. More than 160,000 kilometers of Arctic frontier. Canada, over the edge. High above the scenic contours of the Yukon River, the city of Whitehorse marks the largest population center in all of northern Canada. Whitehorse is pristine, a modern, thriving community, located 1,500 kilometers northwest of Vancouver. the city is surrounded by a lush mountainous landscape and lies protected in the Whitehorse Valley below. Whitehorse boasts a mild, temperate climate, with winters comparable to cities in Canada's far south. Whitehorse is located at kilometer 1426 of the Alaska Highway, an incredible road network more than 2,000 kilometers long, built to connect Alaska to the contiguous United States. The city has been home to First Nations groups like the Southern Shoshone peoples for thousands of years. Today, Whitehorse is a hub of culture, employment, and transportation, home to more than 25,000 year-round residents. Heading west from Whitehorse, mountains and hills lead to a vast expanse of lush valley. This is the Ibex River Valley, and the Ibex River far below. The Ibex River Valley is surrounded by a series of hills, including Mount Williams, Mount Ingram, and a young cinder cone volcano known as Ibex Mountain. It is a lush corridor, some 30 kilometers long, a region famous for its pristine turquoise lakes, and a habitat for the Yukon's Dall sheep population. Further west, the Takini Valley follows the flow of the Takini River. The word Takini comes from the Southern Shoshone language, meaning King Salmon. For generations, the Takini River marked the center of trade between the local First Nations and the coastal Tlingit peoples. More recently, in 1958, the Takini region was at the heart of a raging fire that destroyed thousands of square kilometers and nearly forced an evacuation of nearby Whitehorse. Decades later, new poplars, spruce, and fir trees line the horizon. And lining the banks of the Takini River is one of the most iconic roadways in the world, the gateway to the west, the Alaska Highway. Continuing west from the Takini River, we follow the path of the Alaska Highway. The idea for this international roadway dates back to the 1920s, with the United States' desire for increased national security and a permanent land link to Alaska. While some Canadian officials saw economic benefits, the project did not immediately proceed. It wasn't until World War II and the attack on Pearl Harbor that both the United States and Canada quickly approved the project. Construction began at both ends of the 2,200-kilometer-long highway, March 8, 1942. Amazingly, the two construction crews on either end met in the middle just 6 months later. The Alaska Highway was dedicated November 20th, 1942. But despite the international effort in connecting Alaska to the world, this roadway was not the first transportation corridor in the region. Here, along an old section of Alaska Highway, the village of Champaign is a traditional home to the Southern Tushone peoples. Today, just a dozen or so people live in Champaign year-round, but it remains a popular seasonal residence. And not far away, at a site known as Long Ago People's Place, echoes of the Southern Tushone traditional way of life can be felt.
My name is Harold Johnson. I'm part of the Crow clan of the Southern Tushone people, and I'm the owner and operator of Kwode Dunkai, which is Long Ago People's Place. The Southern Tushone's homeland goes all the way from up around Klawani Lake, past Lake Labarge, and then all the way up towards south of Whitehorse. Traditionally, that was all Southern Tushone territory.
Harold Johnson says the village of Champaign nearby was originally called Shah-the-Laku, or Sunshine Hill Camp. He says this region has been a settlement and trading area for millennia.
Historically, this whole country was a network of trails, and Shah-the-Laku was one of the main camps along the many trails. So it's a ancient village that predates contact.
Now, Johnson says there is new interest in the Southern Tushone culture. Hundreds of tourists and students visit Long Ago People's Place each year. And after a long journey, Harold's wife Meta is a welcome sight to all, feeding hungry travelers from around the world.
So one of the most important things about having a camp like this is feeding people, feeding your family. People that work outdoors, they expend a lot of energy, so you're always having to refuel them. And one of the things we do is we serve hot tea, bannock, done in a cast iron frying pan. And we also will do other meals when people come to visit.
She fires up the wood stove to prepare this fried bread treat enjoyed by locals for well over a century.
So it almost looks like an English muffin in a sense, but for us it's a really good supplement for calcium intake. And we eat a lot of bannock.
Meta Williams says it's a perfect way for young students to try their hand at traditional cooking. A mixture of flour, sugar, baking powder, salt, and water.
So what you want is you want to get a little bit lumpy batter. And it takes time to actually learn how to do this without ending up with something as flat as a pancake.
Once mixed, Meta moves it to the stove and begins preparing a feast. And behind the scenes, Harold Johnson takes a walk back in time into the heart of Southern Tushone culture.
This is where we start our pre-contact tour. Everything back here is based on how life was before European contact to North America. The first item I'm going to share with you guys is what elders have came here and built and shared with me. So this is known as a deadfall trap, and this is how our people harvested fur-bearing animals. And they'd build these traps in the spring and in the summer when the ground was unthawed, and they pounded these in, and then they would set them up in the fall, like end of October, first part of November, when the animals have their winter fur.
Incredibly, Harold Johnson says despite the age of these centuries-old hunting traps, they can still be found deep in the Yukon wilderness.
I got this piece of stick tied on back here, and it's just quite long for my own convenience. But traditionally, this would be some sort of rotten, fermented fat, some that would still hold a smell when it was 40, 50 below Fahrenheit. So the wolverine, fox, lynx comes in through here, gives the meat a pull, and all that drops on his spine, crushing the backbone. This ancient trap is probably as humane as anything today.
Next on the tour, Johnson reveals how the Southern Tushone peoples dealt with the harsh Yukon winters.
This is daku, or bark house, spruce bark house, and this is one of our traditional shelters people used.
Johnson says the Southern Tushone were a nomadic people, rarely staying in one place for longer than 10 days. But he says they traveled with the seasons and may have used shelters like these more than once over the years.
And you see how big these bark pieces are? This comes off really easy off the spruce trees in May and June. All I used to take these big, huge pieces off like this was a sharp stick. It just basically almost like peeling a banana. And then once you get them peeled, you can lay them out flat on the ground, and they dry for about 2 days, and then they're good to build with. This one here is still a work in progress because I think it should have another layer over this also, and then it would be completely waterproof. And this would be a place where people slept.
Meanwhile, back in the kitchen, the feast is complete. Traditional fried bread, paired with a delicious moose roast.
Okay, so this is nice and done. There you go.
These meals are a delight to visitors, and any scraps will be left for the animal residents here. Animals Harold Johnson insists are a key part of long-ago people's place.
Part of the education of our history is our relationship with our animals, and we had a really long-standing working relationships with our hunting dogs and our work dogs. These little dogs here, they're known as the Athabascan hunting dog, and our people use these dogs for thousands of years. And the interesting thing is there's a exact same look as her, but they're bigger, and we use them as work dogs, and we use these small ones as hunting dogs. And this is Nezzy. Come here, you can jump on my... That's my baby. Yeah, she's a good bear dog. She keeps them all at bay.
And it's not only here that dogs are an important part of life. Just down the road from long-ago people's place, Stacy Sechelt raises more than a dozen dogs dedicated to the pursuit of dog-powered sports.
Dogs have been integral in the Yukon for a long time, from the First Nations to the gold rush. I got into it because I've always had a fascination and love of the north. So growing up down south in Calgary, I always wanted to escape the big city. So I worked for a musher up here, worked in a dog sled kennel, giving tours and guiding people through a couple winters, and loved spending all the day, every day with dogs.
Sechelt lives kilometers from the nearest house, so barking from 5 separate kennels is no big deal. But feeding time is a frenzy.
I have 12 right now, and I moved up here with one dog, one pet dog. Got a couple dogs from the kennel I was working at, one of which is still remaining after 14 years, and 2 actually. One is 14 and a half years old now, so they're thriving. They're hardy dogs, they're pretty tough, and they're usually pretty healthy too. So, and then I just kind of get, as I needed dogs or wanted to round out a certain part of the team, like a leader or a stronger dog or something like that, I'd get another dog or 2 along the way, usually from friends.
Over the years, Sechelt's devotion to dogs has grown. Now, she's co-founder of the Yukon Dog-Powered Sports Association.
The average person is kind of realizing now that they can, in the Yukon anyways, that it's really easy to hook up your dog who's never had experience pulling before, and they can pull you on your bike, on your rollerblades, or on skis, which is super fun.
And though it's stored for the summer, Sechelt shows us her favorite dog-powered pursuit.
So this is where in the summer I keep my dog sled and skis. Whoops, move that out of the way. Let's pull it out here. This is my new little race sled that I bought from a friend. It's the lightest sled I've ever owned, so it's pretty fun. It's quite flexible. As you can see, it'll go back and forth. You can have these little hang on here, and you can like kick with it too to go even faster. So it's not just a musher standing on the back of the sled doing nothing. We have to work. There's a bit of stuff involved. This is all put away for the summer, so. This is kind of like a bungee that has a little bit of give, so when the dogs pull it, it's not as jarring on them. And that just hooks up with carabiners right here. Yeah, go. And so then here's the all-important snow hook, which if you have a problem with your team, sometimes dogs will get tangled and you need to go untangle them. So that just goes right there. You kick it into the ground and it sticks really well in packed snow. It'll hold them quite a bit. Who's gonna be better? Louis, come here, let's do you. Come here. So I'll just throw a harness on one of them and see what happens. Yes. No, she wants to. No playing, no playing. This isn't the way it should go, but. But this is the recreational world, right? We're not very serious about it. We like to have fun. So he gets hooked up there, and oh, I don't have a collar on him. So usually there and by a collar, he'll be hooked up. used to it. There, and now he's ready to go. Right?
For Sechelt, life along the Alaska Highway never gets boring. And it's a life she once could not have imagined.
It's great. I love it out here. I tell people that I live in the boonies for a reason. This allows me to get away from people and out of, the craziness that is Whitehorse. That may not be crazy to some people.
Continuing west from the village of Champaign, the Desdiash River marks the third northern waterway on our journey. The Desdiash River originates in Desdiash Lake, flowing north, then west, to the town of Haines Junction and the mountains of Kluane National Park. And here, some 50 kilometers east of the park, the river meets the path of the Alaska Highway. The Alaska Highway stretches from Dawson Creek, British Columbia, to Delta Junction, Alaska. For years, it was known as one of the toughest drives in the world, a rugged, unforgiving route through the remote north. But years later, that reputation has changed. With a fully paved route and newly developed stretches of road, the Alaska Highway is now known as one of the most scenic drives in the world. And that scenery stretches as far as the eye can see. On the north bank of the Alaska Highway, spectacular autumn colors line the shores of Pine Lake. Pine Lake extends 4 kilometers to the southwest, a popular camping spot, featuring some of the most pristine waters in the region. And high above the lake, Paint Mountain rises more than 700 meters. It is a popular day hike, overlooking the waters of Pine Lake and the peaks of Kluane National Park beyond. Further north, the landscape of the southwest Yukon begins to rise. Here, high above Marshall Creek, the hillsides ascend more than 2 kilometers. It is a vast, open expanse, part of a group of hills known as the Ruby Range. And here, kilometers from civilization, a unique scene unfolds as an aviation disaster is frozen in time. These are the remains of a U.S. Air Force C-47 search and rescue plane. It crash-landed here February 7, 1950, while searching for another lost aircraft in the area. The C-47, or Dakota, skidded the entire length of this hillside. Miraculously, all 10 crew members survived. But it wasn't easy. With the Alaska Highway not yet built, rescuers had to forage through 100 kilometers of wilderness from Whitehorse. The crew was stranded here for 3 nights in minus 50-degree temperatures. Finally, rescuers arrived, carrying the survivors down the mountain, where they were airlifted to safety. Newspapers around the world recorded it as a daring, dogged rescue. More than 65 years later, this remote crash site remains untouched. "20 kilometers south of the downed C-47 search and rescue plane, and beyond the Ruby Range Mountains, we reach the village of Haines Junction. Haines Junction marks the intersection of the Alaska Highway's northern route to Alaska and the Haines Highway's southern route to Alaska. But Haines Junction has been a junction for thousands of years, a traditional home to the southern Tushone peoples, including the Champagne and Ajac First Nations. Today, it is home to some 500 residents and boasts one of the most incredible backdrops in the world. Less than 10 kilometers to the southwest, Mount Martha Black is stunning. This multi-summited massif rises more than 2,500 meters, the highest point in the Oriole Mountain chain, a group of peaks extending south from Haines Junction. From its base, kilometers of stunning vegetation and fall colors lead to icy peaks high above. And Mount Martha Black, like the village of Haines Junction, is the gateway to one of the world's scenic gems, Kluane National Park and Reserve of Canada.
My name is Carmen Wong. I'm the ecologist team leader for Kluane National Park and Reserve with Parks Canada. So Kluane National Park and Reserve is 22,000 square kilometers. 80% of that is mostly ice, big, large ice fields and glaciers. And that forms with the other protected areas adjacent to the park in the US, one of the largest ice fields, well, actually the largest ice fields outside of Greenland, Antarctica.
Kluane National Park holds a wealth of landscapes, but is dominated largely by the St. Elias Range Mountains.
The St. Elias Range in Kluane contains some of the largest or the tallest mountains in North America. The tallest mountain, Mount Logan in Canada, is in that range and in the national park, and at least 13 of the top 20 highest peaks in North America occur in that range. And of course, you see some of the Front Range behind us, and those are tall mountains, but even behind that, there are a lot taller mountains, and that forms all of what we call the St. Elias Mountains.
But while the soaring peaks of Kluane are amazing, the park holds lower altitude treasures as well.
There's ice fields back there, and then in the Front Range you can see there's spruce-dominated forests, and then big, large valleys like the Elsek Valley behind me.
And it's those lower-level wonders that Carmen Wong is interested in today. She has just completed a mission to the park's remote interior to monitor the health of the park itself.
This is what we call the operational building. Here is where all the gear for the monitoring for the park is based out of. So we have, waders and a bunch of stuff for fish stuff. But this trip was mostly on forest monitoring.
Wong and her team have been studying the health of the park's spruce tree population.
So yeah, we just spent a week on the Elsek River. We were in Kluane National Park, monitoring the plots that we set up to look at the recovery of the forest after the spruce bark beetle outbreak that started about 1995 and went to the mid-2000s. And it killed about 70% of the spruce, huge modification of the forest, and we're trying to figure out whether or not there's enough baby trees coming online to recover the forest back to the pre-beetle forest conditions.
Wong's results will help build for the future here in Kluane. But the results will take time.
Well, we're not sure. That's why those plots are set up. They're set up to be there for, past my career, maybe for hundreds of years, so that people can look at the trajectory of the forest after the spruce bark beetle.
But while Kluane National Park and Reserve of Canada holds a wealth of natural beauty, there is a cultural angle as well, one that is dear to the heart of Parks Canada's Craig McKinnon.
I belong to the Champagne-Ajac First Nation, which comprises, their traditional territory comprises of about half of Kluane National Park. The Champagne-Ajac First Nation, as well as the Kluane First Nation peoples, have been in this area for millennia. This is the place that they used to live off of the land and travel in the area. Only in recent years have they been removed from the landscape.
In 1942, First Nations residents here were forced off the land. It was only in recent decades, as the idea of a national park began to emerge, that attempts were made to repair the damage done.
Kluane National Park was established because of the negotiated treaties or agreements that were formed with Champagne-Ajac and Kluane First Nation. So essentially through these final agreements which established the traditional territory of the First Nation people of the area, it also established the national park, and thus the First Nation rights to harvest and live on the land was reestablished. And that is one of the goals of Kluane National Park, is to reconnect First Nation people to this land in the area, which they've been removed from for the past 50 years.
And Craig McKinnon has been a big part of those efforts. In 2005, he managed a project called Healing Broken Connections, reconnecting First Nations peoples to the park through culture camps, harvesting camps, and recording traditional knowledge of the area. All over the park, examples of the project can be seen.
So what we're going to see now is an example of a wood structure that is called an injul. An injul is a structure that Southern Shoshone people used to stay in, and it's designed to be in areas where people used to come to areas and camp for longer periods of time. As you can see, it's made out of spruce trees and older style trees. It was packed with moss to fill in the cracks, and then on top of the moss they would apply also layers, many layers of clay to make it waterproof. What you see here is just the beginnings of this, and the First Nation people of the current First Nation people of the area are also holding camps, and the plan is to reconstruct this.
Craig McKinnon hopes Healing Broken Connections was just the beginning, that cultural activities at the park will continue to flourish. Both McKinnon and Carmen Wong say the culture of the region and the natural wonders of the park are treasures worth preserving.
Well, this park is, it's a pretty amazing park. The whole statistic that 80% of its ice has a big allure to that, that really forms this landscape. So there's big, wide valleys for exploration. There's all sorts of activities to do, like hiking, backpacking, mountaineering, ski touring, rafting, canoe trips, and they're all pretty wild. There's not a lot of facilities or other people around, and I think that brings people to this place. The park is my office, and I feel pretty lucky to be able to work in such a beautiful and wild space. I might tear up.
Being part of Champagne-Ajac First Nation and this area and this land, being part of it and working for Kluane National Park means a great deal to me. I've grown up in here. My grandparents have lived off the land when I was younger. I got to see that. And now having working for Kluane National Park for the last 24 years, I've got to experience it like no other person has from my First Nation. And it allows me to reconnect to lands that were forbidden to go to. Those are my ancestors, and it's nice to reconnect to that past.
The village of Haines Junction has been long known as the gateway to Kluane National Park. But for the earliest residents of the region, the vistas of Kluane were only visible from the ground. Today, the peaks of the park can be accessed by plane from the tiny airstrip just outside Haines Junction.
My name is Easton Henderson. I work for Kluane Glacier Air Tours. We specialize in flight seeing tours into the Kluane National Park, and most of the park is only visible from the air or from hiking in, so we offer a convenient and quick way to see a huge amount of this protected area park that's not accessible from the road.
For Henderson, the park is part of his daily routine, taking curious visitors on an unimaginable journey.
From the air, you'll see the park in a much more up-close light. We're able to get right over the glaciers, to get over the ice fields, to fly between the mountains. You may have flown over mountains before in an airliner, going over Greenland, over to Europe, but we're able to get right down between the mountains and over top of the glaciers and really get a good up-close look and a personal tour of the park and of the glaciers and of the mountains.
While visitors remark at the ethereal beauty, the remoteness of the park is also an incredible feature.
We're starting off in the Yukon Territory, so we're already in one of the more underpopulated areas in all of North America. From here, we're actually going to fly further to the southwest and into the Kluane National Park, where no one lives. We're going to be flying, on average, about 200 kilometers an hour. We're going to fly, our tours range from about an hour to 2 hours. So on the average 2-hour tour, we may get as far away from any sort of civilization as 100 or more kilometers. And within that 100 or more kilometers in the radius around us, there is probably no one, or if there are other people, you could count them on one hand, hikers and campers who are also sharing the space with us. So very, very remote, one of the more remote places you can get in North America.
And while the park covers thousands of square kilometers, Henderson says he's found a few favorite spots to explore.
We do a number of different tours taking you through a number of great spots, but there's a couple that really stand out. The Lowell Glacier running into the Alsek Lake is absolutely spectacular. It's where the glacier actually runs right into the lake and breaks off little icebergs. They can't get down the river, so they end up floating around in the lake until they melt. That's a pretty good one. The Kaskawalsh Glacier is well known and very renowned for its stripiness, just how much of a painted look it almost has. The third one would be probably the ice fields in the back with Mount Logan, which is Canada's highest mountain, standing at 5,959 meters in the background. Absolutely massive scale out there, and very hard to put into context just the size of this mountain and the size of the ice fields until you can go out and actually look at it and experience it and see it all together.
Henderson says as a pilot, the job he's found here is unparalleled.
I've been a commercial pilot for a number of years now. I've been flying, I started flying about 5 years ago, and been flying commercially for about 3. This job is pretty special in that it's a job where you work in more the tourism side of things, and you actually get to interact with people every day who are having a great time, and they're out on vacation, so they're having a good time, and then we take them out into the park and we show them some pretty amazing things that they've never seen before. Other jobs up here would be camp supply and medevacs and things like that. In comparison with those, this is a much more relaxed, much more easygoing, and much more friendly type of work environment where it's a little bit less get it done, and a little bit more show people a good time.
Easton Henderson spends nearly every day of his summer within the boundaries of Kluane National Park. From glacial lakes to rugged cliff faces, to Canada's tallest mountain, Mount Logan, and the Alaska border beyond. It is an opportunity he says he will never forget.
The park is a pretty incredible, pretty amazing place. And it's a place where I've spent entire days of my life having flown in there so much. Hundreds of flights, hundreds of flight hours into the park. It's in a place that never ceases to amaze. And then from an aviation and a technical standpoint, it's a place that never ceases to teach me new things. The park is an absolutely wild area back there.
From the city of Whitehorse, and the rivers and valleys surrounding, to the contours of the Alaska Highway, and the early First Nations trading routes. To Mount Martha Black, and the peaks of Kluane National Park. The Yukon's western frontier is a mix of cultures and a collage of beauty. It is a frontier alive with autumn colors, relics frozen in time, and glaciers leading to more glaciers. Where Canada's Yukon Territory meets the American state of Alaska. Here, on the edge of Canada.